This reading is an excerpt from You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train. It's a memoir written by Howard Zinn, which tells his personal stories about more than 30 years of fighting for social change, from teaching at Spelman College to protests against the Vietnam War. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory.
Someone asked me yesterday if we're always going to keep doing this history stuff. And I said, maybe, probably. I want to let you know that in November, we're going to be accepting sermon topic ideas. So please do be ready to submit your ideas to that, particularly if you're tired of hearing historical sermons. But today we are going to talk about a little bit of history. We're going to turn our attention to a more modern influence on Unitarian Universalism. Specifically, we're going to talk about James Luther Adams, who is the most important person you've never heard of. He was a Unitarian theologian before the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961, and he remained active for a few decades after. His body of work spans the time leading up to the Second World War through the 1980s. He was one of the most influential voices of liberal religion in the 20th century. And just as a reminder, before the merger, the Unitarians and the Universalists were Christian denominations. So Adams uses the language of liberal Christianity of the 20th century because that was his context. That's when he was writing. And although his language may not entirely work for all of us today, there is a lot of value to be found in his thinking, and he is arguably the foundational theologian of Unitarian Universalism because he was at the height of his career when the merger happened. So a lot of his thinking is intricately woven into the fabric of Unitarian Universalism. And perhaps his most enduring concept is called the 5 smooth stones of liberalism. That's a little early. If we could put that down for just a sec. Thank you. Let's hear it up. Let's hear it for the volunteer tech team. Come on, guys. Thank you. All right, so why 5 smooth stones? What a weird name. That is a nod to the story of David and Goliath. I'm sure that many of us are passingly familiar with the ancient Hebrew story of David defeating the giant Goliath. Casual readers of that story often miss 2 very small but important details that give that story a deeper meaning. First is that David was offered the king's armor, but he refused to wear it because it didn't fit him. He was young, and he was scrawny, and the armor was too big, and he couldn't move well in it. Secondly, is that David took with him 5 smooth stones for his slingshot. He stood against a bigger, fiercer, more experienced, properly outfitted giant, and he took with him nothing but himself, just as he was, and 5 smooth stones. And so the story goes, and it is assuredly a story. So the story goes, David won. In choosing to call his 5 foundational precepts of liberal religion 5 smooth stones, James Luther Adams was alluding to liberal religion and how it might prevail over the forces of conservatism. More importantly, how it will not. If we adopt the approaches of conservatism, we will not defeat conservatism, right? It's similar to that idea of David needing to go face the giant by himself. We cannot take up the practices and culture of conservative religion and hope to prevail against it. Or, as another 20th century prophet, Audre Lorde, said, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. If we truly believe that religion should change to fit the needs of the time, that it should be affirming of our humanity, that it should be liberatory, then we must build our theologies, our culture, and our religious practices on those foundations. Okay, so let's dig into the 5 smooth stones. I'd like that slide to go up now, please. Thank you. We have a couple of slides to help understand what happened here. So this is just a citation slide. If you want to look it up, you want to take your phone out, now's the time. Where I'm getting these from is a book called On Being Human Religiously, a book called On Being Human Religiously. And I'll tell you more about that source later. All of this information is also just a Google search away. Okay, the 5 smooth stones. The first one is a constant willingness to change when we learn new things. As Adam wrote, religious liberalism depends on the principle that revelation is continuous. Meaning has not been fully captured, nothing is complete, and nothing is exempt from criticism, end quote. When we talk about liberal religion, this is what we mean. Not necessarily politically liberal, although there is a strong overlap right now that has not always been the case, it will not always be the case. But liberal religion is about being willing to change versus the conservative stance of maintaining what is, including beliefs, practices, culture, and tradition. So we think about some religious traditions that have not changed, that resist change over centuries. We are open to change all the time when we learn new things. The second smooth stone of liberalism is the primacy of covenantal relationships. That's probably not a phrase that Adams would have used, but that's how we talk about it now. Several weeks ago, we started off with a bang, talking about the Puritans and how the Puritans gathered in mutual consent versus mutual belief, and they used covenants to help them do that, and we still do, to maintain pluralistic communities today. So Adams wrote, quote, all relations between persons ought ideally rest on mutual, free consent and not coercion. Liberalism and its social articulation might be defined as a protest against pecking orders, end quote. Liberalism seeks to establish a society, first a congregation, then a society of mutuality, and put an end to the hierarchies that humans consistently create and recreate. And this leads us to the third smooth stone, quote, the moral obligation to direct one's effort toward the establishment of a just and loving community. And Adams goes on to say, a faith that is not the sister of justice is bound to bring men to grief. Yeah. That's a good one. Our desire for just relationships cannot stay in the congregation. We are morally obligated to work for just relationships in our communities and in the world. Adams's fourth smooth stone is putting our faith to work in the real world, which is called praxis. To quote him directly, we deny the immaculate conception of virtue and affirm the necessity of social incarnation. I am obsessed with this sentence. It might be my next tattoo. We deny the immaculate conception of virtue and affirm the necessity of social incarnation. He goes on to say, the faith of the liberal must express itself in societal forms, in the forms of education, and economic and social organization, and political organization. Without these, freedom and justice in community are impossible. Things do not get better on their own. They get better because people make them better. And this brings us to the last of the 5 smooth stones of liberal religion, which can be summed up in one word: hope. To quote Adams for a final time, liberalism holds that the resources, both divine and human, that are available for the achievement of meaningful change justify an attitude of ultimate hope. Optimism, actually, he said, ultimate optimism. We, religious liberals, have every reason to be hopeful because we are well-resourced for bringing about the change that we want. We have cause to be hopeful, even and especially in times like these. Okay, that's the end of the slides. Thank you. All right, as I briefly mentioned earlier, these 5 smooth stones are found in a collection of essays by James Luther Adams that were published in 1976 under the title On Being Human Religiously. This specific essay is titled Guiding Principles for a Free Faith, and it is a compilation of Adams's essays, principles, and speeches that were published between 1933 and 1955. Take a second to think about that time span, 1933 to 1955. The parallel between then and now is clear, and it cannot be overstated. We find ourselves in a time of increasing conservatism and repression. White nationalism is on the rise again, this time underpinned in a new way by a distortion of Christianity that is a powerful means of behavioral control. The streets of some American cities are filled with masked agents and unmarked vehicles kidnapping people, including journalists and other supposed enemies of the current administration. From the rhetoric of elected leaders to the comment section of every social media outlet to the burgeoning AI industry to education, media, the beauty industry, the nonprofit industrial complex, the military, the prison industrial complex, religion. Every American institution has been touched and corrupted by this new wave of American Christo-fascism. Of course, we feel overwhelmed and helpless. It's designed to make us feel overwhelmed and helpless. But this is not new, and we know how to deal with it. In the lead up to the Second World War, James Luther Adams went to Germany, and he worked with the Christian religious resistance to Nazism. These 5 smooth stones are the direct result of that work. These are the means by which religious liberalism can defeat the giant of fascism and religious conservatism. And it is now our turn to wield these stones. These are our religious inheritance: constant change, covenanted relationships, justice, agency, and hope. This was the response of the Unitarianism that faced down fascism in the 1930s and 40s. You know that the chalice is a symbol from that time, right? The American Service Association was sneaking people out of Nazi-occupied territory with fake passports, and they needed it to look a little more official, so they came up with this idea of a chalice. We've been doing this. We know how to do this. We have beaten back fascism before, and we will do so again, and then probably again after that, because that's the way it goes. This is not the end of the American story. This is not the end of religious liberalism. Now, when Adams wrote about hope, he also said you had to work for the just world that you want. They're not divorced. He said that we had cause for ultimate optimism, not immediate optimism, but ultimate or eventual, one day, optimism. And that optimism is dependent on the other 4 stones. We have what it takes to make this world a better place, an open place, a place that terrifies fascists, a place where we are who we are, we love who we love, human life is messy, and nobody tells us what to do with our own bodies. That place is possible because we are open to constant change, and because we engage in covenanted relationships, and because we work for justice, and because we have agency. Beloveds, hear me on this. Cynicism is cheap, and it is easy, and it does nothing to build the world that we dream about. Hope is costly because it has value, and it has meaning, and it is ours. It is ours. Hope is our birthright as humans, and it is our religious inheritance as Unitarian Universalists. We're not separate from that time when this was written. We will come through this, and we will do so because of our great resources: openness to change, insistence on right relationships, the work we do for justice, the agency that we have to work in the world. That gives me hope, real hope. And the way that I've seen you all embody these 5 smooth stones gives me hope too. The work of this congregation, both inside and out. May each of you find a hope in us as well. That ultimate hope that we will overcome the forces of control and destruction yet again. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.